Good afternoon. I think we'll go ahead and try and get this meeting started. So I'd like to call the meeting of the Early Childhood Care and Education Commission to order. And please remember that we are live streaming this meeting so that throughout our discussion you need to speak into the microphone so we can pick it up for the live streaming. I'll ask now to begin our meeting. I'd like Janet Grigg to call the roll. Janet, roll call, please.
I don't think this mic is working. Hello, hello. Oh, it is. Conrad Appel, Karen Austin, Dr. Judy Armstrong, Maria Blanco, Senator Regina Barrow, Mark Bond, Susanna Boudreau, Barry Carter, Susanna Craig, Dana Como, Dr. Cynthia F. DiCarlo, Rachel Dugas, Representative Kathy Edmonston, Tara Emery, Lindsay Fisher, Representative Barbara Raish Freiberg, Jim Garvey, Melissa Gudo, Dr. James Gray, Angela Groh, Sherry Garisco, Crystal Hillard Mitchell, Mary Beth Hughes, Tessa C. Holloway, Brooke E. Huddleston, Dr. Misty Perry Lassane, Dejanay Clark Jackson, Ruth W. Lawson, Dr. Timothy Magner, Senator Beth Mizell, Caroline Oglesby, Fairshea Perkins, Dr. Keith Perrin, Leanne Price, Caitlin Robinson, Monique Rouge, Monique Scott Spalding, Dr. Libby Saunier, Melissa Stilley, Michael Tipton, Marcus S. Thomas, Nancy Touraine, Kyrie Waheed, Shanoa Warren, Rochelle Wilcox.
Here. I know. Perfect timing.
Okay, okay, yeah. Good afternoon. This is exciting. We've got a presentation today, and we're going to look at some information regarding the TriShare model. To present this information item, I'd like to introduce Shannon Garrett, who's joining us via Zoom from Michigan. Shannon serves as the TriShare Senior Program Advisor for the Michigan Department of Lifelong Education, Advancement, and Potential. Shannon, do we have Shannon?
We do have
While
Shannon.
they crank up Shannon, would you like to introduce our new deputy superintendent? We should have done this from the beginning. I'm sorry and I apologize.
Yes, so good afternoon. I echo Representative Freiberg. It is so wonderful to see all of you here today. Thank you for making time to join us. As you know, I'm Karen Powell. I'm Deputy Assistant Superintendent for the Office of Early Childhood Care and Education here at the department, and I am pleased to introduce to you today Barry Carter, our new Assistant Superintendent.
Thank you, everyone. Happy to be here. Happy to be involved in this process. Look forward to working with each and every one of you and understanding the processes that you have here. And so look forward to what's going to be presented today and enjoying drinking out of the fire hydrant that is early childhood that I've been learning for the past few weeks. So looking forward to meeting all of you.
Unfortunately, our speaker is having a little difficulty hearing us, but as long as we can hear her, that will be the most pressing and important thing. So let me see whether she is ready. We are grateful for her joining us, even though she could not travel today.
Okay, I'm going to unmic and get started. And I know we're having a little technical difficulty here, so maybe Karen can let me know via text if there's any issues. But thank you all for inviting me here today to talk about the My TriShare Child Care Program. My name is Shannon Garrett. I am the Senior Program Advisor for the TriShare Program for the Michigan Department of Lifelong Education Advancement and Potential. So we can go ahead and get started with the next slide. I'm going to give you all an overview of the program, a little bit about the history of how we got to where we are, and then I'll talk about how the program works in general, and then with each of the participants and players, and then talk a little bit about where we think we're going to be going next. So My TriShare is a program, it's a public-private partnership, the first of the kind in the country. It splits the cost of an employee's child care equally between the employer, the employee, and the state of Michigan. It passed in our Republican legislature with our Democratic governor, so it has broad bipartisan support. We hear great things from our chambers and our small business association and folks like that, as well as the families and the providers. So it has broad bipartisan support across the spectrum and is intended to help increase the labor force participation. This really, it's been an idea that's been floating around in Michigan for a while, but once the COVID pandemic really put that spotlight on childcare and the impact that childcare and childcare costs and childcare availability can have on labor force participation, I think is when all these folks started coming together to really introduce this. So the purpose is to increase our labor force participation, help families stay, working parents stay in the workforce, and then help foster that economic security for families and providers. So we can go to the next slide for a brief history of the program. So the My TriShare program was introduced in the state through our appropriation process. So it was in the fiscal year 21 budget. They appropriated $1.1 million for a one-time appropriation that would pilot this program in 3 regions. The boilerplate language gave very little direction on what it would look like, other than it would be a cost-sharing program between employers and employees in the state of Michigan, and then defined 3 regions, which pretty much were an urban, a rural, and a suburban region. And fairly well, when the appropriation passed, it was assigned to Michigan's Department of Labor and Economic Opportunity, which we refer to as LEO. And LEO gave it to the Michigan Women's Commission to actually implement the pilot and get the program going. At the time, I was with the Women's Commission, but I'm not working on this program, but I do have some of the history there if there's any questions that come up around the very early stages. But what I do know and what I can share is that really early on, people liked this idea. They liked this concept of a public-private partnership. They liked the concept of employers having some skin in the game in terms of helping employees and helping to offset the employer's portion. Sorry, the initial appropriation was $1.1 million. So the FY21 appropriation was $1.1 million. Pretty soon after that, we, like I said, people were really interested in this. And so some private foundations started saying they'd like to see this expand quickly, or at least include a few more areas of Michigan in the pilot program. And so we had the W.K. Kellogg Foundation and the Balmer Group come in with some additional funding to stand in for what would have been the state's portion of that three-way split, so that we could expand the pilot into the regions that both of those foundations have their footprint in. And then, the legislature and the governor kept supporting the program throughout the process. So in FY22, they appropriated $2.5 million, and we added a total of 7 regions to the program. And so it was still in the pilot phase, but we were expanding it out to see what it looked like throughout the state. Kept the appropriations coming. In FY24, they increased it to $3.4 million and $3.5 million in FY25, which is the fiscal year we are currently in. So we're currently being funded about $3.4 million year to year. We, over this last year, have been going through a lot of transition with the program. So we have been transitioning from a pilot project or a pilot program into a more permanent program. Hesitant to say permanent with anything that's in an appropriation and not statutory, but it is being treated as an ongoing program with its own line item in the appropriation. So we're moving from that pilot phase to permanent, to more ongoing presence, and also going from our regional approach to our statewide approach. And also at the same time, we were moved from the Michigan Women's Commission to this newly created department that Governor Whitmer created called the Department of Lifelong Education, Advancement, and Potential. And this new department is where all of our various childcare programs in the state, among other education programs, but childcare in particular, all coming together under one umbrella instead of being spread out through multiple state departments. So a lot of that transition happening. I'll talk a little bit more about the process and how it is for all of the individual players, but I will say when it comes to the regional facilitator hubs and our statewide administrative partner, we started off with this approach that this would be sort of locally organized and locally recruited efforts, so that folks on the ground in their region know a lot about what the needs are. They know their employers, they have those relationships, and so we put out requests for proposals for a facilitator hub in each of the regions that we were piloting. And then those folks would go out and recruit the employers to be a part of it, and then they would also actually administer the program. So they would set up their own process for vetting the families that were coming through, making sure they met our federal poverty line parameters, which I'll talk about in a moment. Each of these facilitator hubs was getting the invoices from every childcare provider and then collecting all the contributions from the 3 players and making those payments. So as you can imagine, it got pretty complicated pretty quickly. And we determined to instead go with one statewide administrative partner. So we still have these 12 facilitator hubs around the state who are working at their local level to spread the word about the program, to recruit employers into the program, to answer questions. But once the employer agrees to sign up, they actually sign their agreement with our statewide administrative partner for the fiscal, the exchange of dollars and things like that. And then we have one application portal that all of the employees use across the state, so that we have a uniform and streamlined process for determining eligibility. So we can go to the next slide. So I already got into this a little bit, but we have the regional facilitator hubs that go out and promote the program and recruit those employers. So they're the ones that are on the ground. They're the face of the program. They really are the folks who are making this all come together and bringing it to more families and more employers around the state. And then, like I said, the statewide administrative partner actually processes all of the participation. So they sign the employer agreements, they collect the invoices from the child care providers, they pay the providers within a week of getting an invoice, and then they're also collecting the contributions from the employer or the employee in the state of Michigan. I want to emphasize here, I know that you all are looking at different opportunities and options for childcare there. I always try to stress that this is not Michigan's one size fits all answer to solving the childcare issues. This is just one part of a continuum of childcare support and innovation that's happening throughout the state. So we know this isn't necessarily the answer for everyone, but it is helping employers in particular be able to maintain their workforce and attract new employees. So it's open to employers of any size and any sector. We know that there are some states that are starting to do similar programs or have already done similar programs, and some of them are putting different parameters around the employers and the sizes and goals that they have. We don't have any of that here in Michigan, just by choice of making it as simple as possible here. There are a couple of kind of values that are at the core of our program that we maintain, and then a lot of the rest of the program is really up to employers and how they want to implement it among their employees. But our first value, our first rule is that parents have choice in childcare. So with our My TriShare program, we do not let the employers dictate where the childcare has to be. We don't buy slots in specific childcare providers or centers. We know that there's a lot of information, a lot of reasoning, a lot of decisions that go into why parents choose the childcare that they choose. And so we need to let that be flexible for the parents and the families themselves. The second piece of our core values here and our rules around the program is that it only covers licensed childcare options. So at this time, we don't do anything around license exempt or other types of informal care coverage through the My TriShare program. But our licensed care options include what you consider traditional full-time or part-time childcare, preschool, before and after school care, and we also include licensed summer camps, whether those are licensed through the child care program, they're a licensed child care summer camp, or they're a licensed children's camp, which both of those are licensed under the same statute in Michigan. That licenses themselves are actually issued by different agencies. But we know often, especially in some of our rural areas, summer camps are often the only type of childcare that's available for some families. And so we wanted to make sure that that was an option to be a part of this if the employer chose to. And then our third piece is that all the participants must be located in Michigan. So our employers do not necessarily have to be headquartered in Michigan, but they have to be located in Michigan. They have to have an office here. And then our employees have to be residents of the state of Michigan, and our licensed childcare providers have to be licensed in the state of Michigan. So this is where we run into some issues, and I'm sure all states do around our borders, where some folks might live in the state of Michigan, might work in the state of Wisconsin up in the Upper Peninsula, or their childcare provider might be just across the border. And unfortunately, we had to draw the line somewhere, and it's around everyone must be located in the state of Michigan. And then the final piece is that this program is really geared toward helping those families that are most at risk of dropping out of the workforce because of the cost of childcare. And I don't know if you're familiar with the term ALICE that United Way uses to look at that sort of population of folks who are right at the edge of benefits and being able to afford the actual cost of living. But ALICE stands for Asset Limited, Income Constrained, Employed. So folks who are in the workforce, but struggling to actually make ends meet. And so here in Michigan, we defined that for this My TriShare program as household incomes between 200 and 325% of the federal poverty line. And if you go to the next slide, we have a overview of what that looks like. What that looks like for the 2025 eligibility. I will say that we don't use the more complex formula that our child care scholarship or child care subsidy uses. This is just a straight household income as compared to the FPL. Those who are under 200% are eligible for our state's child care scholarship called the Child Development and Care Program. And so if they are eligible for that program, we try to warmly walk them over to that program so that they can get the most beneficial support. And then if there are families who are over 325% of the household or of the federal poverty line, we do allow a waiver process if there are some undue hardships that family is facing that may, but for the TriShare program, they might have to leave the workforce. And then I'm going to look here. I saw the text just came in, and sounds like we're going to get to some Q&A. I'm going to open that box here so I can see it if we need to. Okay, thank you. All right, so we'll go to the next slide here and start to talk about each of the players. So we have our employers, our employees, and our providers. Those are the sort of the three stakeholders or participants that we refer to in addition to the state of Michigan itself. But the employers, so our regional facilitator hubs go out and they recruit the employers to be part of the program. The employer signs up, they sign their agreement with our statewide partner, and they're a part of the program. A few things to know about the employer's side of things. The employers set their own budget. So they set how much overall they have to spend supporting employee child care. They cannot cap the amount per employee. They can only cap their overall budget. So in order to participate, an employer must commit to contributing a full 1/3 of the actual child care costs of at least one child, of at least one employee for at least 1 year. So we wanted to make sure that this wasn't some program that would cut off the family, 3 or 4 months in if there was a cap per family. We wanted to make sure that they're guaranteed to be a part of this program and have the support for at least a year. So the employer sets their overall budget, and then the hubs or our statewide partner will help that employer understand about how many childcare slots that budget would typically cover in their region. So, say I will just use some round numbers that they have a $20,000 budget. We say that would cover, 4 slots for a year. And then they figure out how they want to roll that out to their employees. So again, the employer determines how best to distribute those slots because they know their employees, they know their staff, they know what the needs are, and we don't want to try to do a one size fits all because that never works when it comes to childcare usually. So the employers are using a variety of ways to roll that out. Sometimes employers are finding that they don't have as many families or employees who qualify as they thought they did. So they're able to give child care support to everyone who needs it that's within the eligibility. Sometimes the employers do 1 child per family or first come, first serve. Sometimes they take a look through human resources and management to determine which employees might be most at risk of leaving and use this as a way to help keep and retain those folks. Sometimes they do it by staff classifications. It's really up to the employers. But we wanted to make sure that they weren't capping per employee, that we were trying to help them understand how many people and how many employees their overall budget could support. So the benefits really, I hope are obvious, that it's in helping with employee recruitment and retention. We were intending to remove a significant barrier to employment and help develop and strengthen that talent pipeline. And if we move on to the next slide, you'll see that it turns out we are accomplishing that. So over the last year in 2024, we had a third-party evaluator come in and look at the My TriShare program. It was a comprehensive year-long evaluation process, and every single participant was invited to be a part of the evaluation process. So every participating employer was invited, every family employee was invited, every child care provider was invited to be a part of the process through both and surveys and focus groups. So we feel like we have a pretty good overview of how folks feel about the program. And it turns out it's doing what it's intended to do. So that's always a good feeling. As of this evaluation process, we have 71% of employers saying that they believe the program has helped with their employee retention, and 80% believe it will be helpful in the future. We had only 38% that said that it had helped recruit new employees, but 73% believe it will be helpful to recruit in the future. Part of that is, the feedback that we're getting from employers is that they don't know the household income of their employees or the people that they are hiring. So they can't necessarily guarantee this as a benefit. And that's something that we've heard very loud and clear and are looking at ways to try to help with that in the future. And then, like I said before, it's all business sizes. And so you can see on the screen there kind of the breakdown that we had currently, at the time that they did this report. So this would have been as of the fall of 2024. That was the breakdown across the different sizes of businesses. And one of the unintended but really awesome side impacts of this program is that child care providers themselves are starting to sign up as employers and provide this benefit to their employees. So when they have, one of their families that they're already giving care for comes to them and says, we're a part of this program now, and we need you to send the invoice to this place instead of us, then the providers get curious about what this program is and are starting to find ways to offer it to their own employees and try to help shore up that sector a little bit. So we're very happy about that side effect. And then the next slide is just sharing some of the stuff that we hear anecdotally out in the field from employers. This is just one quote. I would say that, things that I personally have heard, like in the Grand Rapids, Michigan area, there was an employer who talked about how they had an employee that they had been trying to get to come. She was part-time and they were trying to get her to be full-time, and she wasn't able to do it because of the cost of childcare. And so she kept saying that she would like to, but she couldn't. But now that they are a part of the My TriShare program, her childcare cost is reduced by 2/3. So she was able to accept that full-time position. And those are the kind of stories that really keep me showing up to work every day for doing this kind of work, because it's really great. We've also heard about employees finally accepting promotions, because they were afraid to accept a promotion and get a raise and then lose some of their benefits, like the child care scholarship. And so now that they have the My TriShare program, that kind of removes one of those barriers. So yeah, we'll move on to the next slide and start talking about those employees themselves. So once the employer determines their parameters and rolls it out to their staff, then the employees go to our statewide administrative partners website, which is mytrishare.org. That's mitryshare.org. And there's an application that they fill out, and it asks for information about their household income. The statewide administrative partner is the one that determines the eligibility based on household income. That's because we wanted it streamlined throughout the state, putting it all through one partner as opposed to the multiple regional facilitator hubs, and also to keep it away from the employers. Like we said before, the employers only know how much they pay in salary or wages to the staff person. They don't know, and they don't need to know what the household income is for that employee. And so we want to be able to keep that private from the employer. And so that's why we do it through this process. And then if the family already has care, then the statewide partner will work with the family and the provider to get their provider into the database so that they can just do a simple drop of the invoice in on whatever the schedule is for that provider. And then if the family does not have childcare, the hub itself or the statewide partner or together, they will help the family find available care that meets the family's needs. So that's another part of the process there. And again, we keep that parental choice that's central to the My TriShare program. As I said before, the only requirements are that the provider must be located in Michigan and licensed. So for the families, the big one is that it reduces their costs by 66%. And that's not nothing. That's huge for a lot of families. It helps them locate available childcare, which sometimes can be difficult to find. And so this is just another way of being able to help families get the care that they need, and removing those barriers to staying in employment. So we'll go to the next slide, which again goes back to our evaluation and shows that this is meeting the intention here. So 97% of the families that are participating said that this program has improved their financial stability. Again, it's helping parents remain in the workforce. They're able to take promotions. They're moved from part-time into full-time. And I think importantly, in two-parent households or two adult income households, it helps answer the question about whether or not one of them might need to quit because their entire income is going to pay for childcare. And we know that's a question that a lot of families face. So we're happy the program is helping with that. And we'll move into the next one. Next slide is one of our participants, Jennifer, shared with us what this program has meant for her and her 3 school-age children. We know that these are choices that families have to make, especially working families with young children have to make all the time about, where are we putting our family's finances? And we know that childcare can be central in helping families to stay in the workforce and are just as important as, the other financial constraints or the other financial needs of a family. So we're pleased to see that it's working that way. I know here in my own backyard, I live in Traverse City, Michigan, which is in the Northwest Lower Peninsula, fairly rural area aside from the city. And this region was one of our first pilot regions, one of those first 3. And within, I think it was probably the first 2 years of the program, there was a newspaper article here locally talking about the program, and it had an interview with a young couple who they were talking about how they were able to save for a down payment on their first house because of this program, reducing their childcare costs by 66%. So again, stories like that are why we do this work. So we'll go into the next slide here and talk about our, I don't want to say last participant because the state's still a part of it and there's plenty of other stakeholders aside from all these, but the third major part of the program here are our childcare providers. So a few things to know about how childcare providers participate as the providers is that they bill their services at their market rate. So they can't charge more or less to people who are participating in My TriShare. And by the same token, the state does not set a rate for childcare in this program. So we don't have any requirements for the providers other than they must be located in Michigan and licensed. But we don't do some of the things that some people have brought up as possibilities, I think, in other states. I think maybe some legislators here had started looking at it, but at this point, we don't do any requirements around, only providers that participate that pay certain wages, or that they have to maintain certain hours or availability or anything like that. This is just families with their childcare providers at the market rate. And the goal really is to make this participation as easy as possible for the providers themselves. So we didn't want any added rules or requirements for them. We wanted a simple billing portal and timely payments, so that nothing we were doing with this program was causing any undue burden or extra work on the providers themselves. So the providers submit the invoice directly to our statewide administrative partner. The administrative partner pays that bill in full right away. And then it's up to the statewide partner to go collect the thirds from the employer, the employee, and the state. So that burden is not on the providers to try to hunt down payments from 3 different sources. That would be entirely unfair. And then, the benefits there are the timely payments. It's helping to promote their services. And they're guaranteed these payments on time. And like I said, the other bonus is that they can participate as employers themselves. I will say that, just pause here to say, when it comes to child care providers participating as employers, the same rule applies, that they cannot dictate where their employees use their child care or get their child care. So if I'm a child care provider, I want to offer this to my employees, I cannot say you have to use our child care to be a part of the program. So we make it very clear to providers that if they're going to participate, they know that they might have to be giving a third of a payment to a different child care provider. And most of the time, the providers are all on board with that, because they understand why families choose the child care that they choose. So they're just participating and appreciating it, because it's helping to shore up their own workforce. So we'll go to the next slide with the evaluation. Again, doing what it's intended to do, 56% saying that it's helping improve their financial stability. Not as high of a feedback number there, but that's because, hopefully all the families are generally paying on time and the financial stability is okay otherwise without the My TriShare program. But I think that they included there about being able to get payment from a family that might have been struggling otherwise. I think that's where this 56% comes in, where a provider may have had a family that wasn't always paying on time, or had to pay in different types of installments. And so this way they're able to get their payments on time as it's billed. So we'll go to the next slide, which kind of talks about our latest numbers. And our latest numbers here are as of January, because the February reports were just turned into me, so I haven't had time to really update that yet. So we have, at this time, roughly 210 employers participating throughout the state. We have 799 approved families. That means that those are 799 families that have been vetted for eligibility and approved as falling within that 200 to 325% FPL, or they've been waived in for being under or over income. But they're not all necessarily currently using childcare. So that's where the active families line comes in. 610 are actively using childcare at this moment. We're getting bills for them and paying those bills. And that is 775 children among those 610 active families. And that's because we know families use childcare in different ways. So a family might be approved for participation in the program, but they don't currently need childcare because they're covered during the school year, that it's summertime when they use childcare. So, or they might be approved, but they haven't been able to find licensed care that meets their needs yet. So there's a number of reasons, but we wanted to make that distinction in our tracking of the numbers. And one other thing that I would just note there with our asterisk is that we are wrapping up this transition of all of the administrative work coming from the facilitator hubs to our statewide partner. And so these numbers are likely a little lower than they are in the real world, because we just hadn't had everybody put into the system yet. But I will say that the program had a modest growth rate month over month in the beginning there. We're starting to really feel some momentum now, but it did start so slowly. And anyone who's considering doing this type of program, I try to make sure we point that out, that in the beginning, especially when we were still really in that pilot phase, employers were hesitant to join. They were hesitant to sign up for something that was a pilot to offer a benefit that may or may not exist the following budget year for the state. And we understand that. And so now that it's more of a permanent line item and the word of mouth is spreading among employers, we're starting to get more employers signing on every month. So we expect that it's going to start to grow pretty exponentially now that the hubs have been able to offload all of their administrative work and just concentrate on the recruitment efforts. So that's been pretty great. The other thing I'll point out to folks who are considering doing something similar is that it takes a while to get an employer to sign up for a program like this. This is similar to any other sort of benefits sales, like vendors going out and getting an employer to sign up for vision benefits or dental benefits. So it can take anywhere from about 6 months to more than a year to get an employer signed up. So then what's next? So we're looking at the evaluation. We're taking that seriously. If you want to take the next slide, we're taking a look at what are the reasons that people were not signing up or not participating. And so in our conversations with the currently participating employers, employees, and providers, our evaluator also reached out to some folks who had been part of it and had decided not to participate any longer, and some employers and folks who had been approached and didn't ever sign up, and to sort of find out why that was. So the biggest challenges that we're seeing really is around employers wanting a higher eligibility threshold, that it turns out that not enough of their employees are eligible, or not as many as they thought they would have. And again, that comes down to employers not knowing the household incomes. So they can't know that for their current employees, and they also cannot use it as a recruitment tool because they can't guarantee that this would be a benefit. We're also seeing an issue with employers in more rural areas where their employees are more likely to fall within that income range. Those employers in our rural areas tend to be big national companies that are not interested in doing single state benefits. So like your Walmarts, Home Depot, Best Buy, those kinds of groups or companies. So we're using the recent evaluation work to work with our administration and our legislators to see how we can structure our funding, maybe make some changes in our legislation and policies so that we can really take this to scale. We do have some exciting announcements that we'll be sharing later this spring that I unfortunately cannot announce yet here, but we are going to be doing some things that I think will help more employers be able to help more of their employees soon. So that's kind of the end of the presentation there. I do have my contact information on the last slide, and am happy to take questions by phone or email if you ever want to share that. And I'm going to get my text going back here so I can see if there's any questions.
Okay, thank you so
All
much,
right.
Shannon. Can you hear us?
I'm gonna mute to see if I can hear anything being said.
Let's see, are you able to hear us now? Okay, well, we will not be.
Okay, I unfortunately cannot hear if you're talking. I'm sorry.
So, please, I want you to be able to ask your questions.
Great. I have the Q&A open, I have the chat open, and I have text open if there's any questions.
Type your questions into the chat so that Shannon can read them and then answer them. So, Farishing.
I see one in the chat. Can family contributions be made through DCFSA for tax benefits? Yes. We are able to do that. I will say it is one of the areas that we are having the most difficulty because the FSAs are all different vendors with different ways that they process contributions and payments. And so for those FSAs that are able to make, let me back up and say our statewide administrative partner is the United Way of Northwest Michigan. So if an FSA can agree to make the United Way of Northwest Michigan an approved child care provider, then that tends to work really well to be able to do it through there, because then the family can just get their contributions paid through there or get reimbursed through there. So it is something that we're trying to work on. It's hard. I think what would really be helpful is if one of our companies that's participating would actually go to the IRS and get some clarification around FSAs and tax credits and those kinds of things. But yeah, if they're willing to work with us, we're willing to work with them. And I see that we're going to pause for a second here. So I'm just going to mute so you don't have to hear my puppy.
Pause and see whether they can fix this so it's a little more effective. So wait up to you. I just make a comment that's not dependent on. So right now the U.S. Chamber is trying to decouple the child FSA and the tax credit, because you can't get both. So they're trying to make it where you decouple so you could get both. So then it would really reduce burden for families. So thank you for giving us a moment. It gives you time to gather your questions together.
You
Yes, I can hear. There's a little bit of feedback, but I can hear you now.
Can you hear us right now?
Yes, I heard that with some feedback, but I heard it.
Okay, folks, so we can stand it. We're gonna give it a try.
Okay, I'll try to get it. Hi Shannon, my name is Mary Beth Hughes. I represent, Alabama, the state's chamber. And your question, you talked a little bit about challenges regarding employers and things like that.
Well, I the question asker cut out. Seems like maybe got muted. Okay, I do see. Can you expand on any challenges you experienced when pushing this through the legislature? I would say the legislature gave it to us. So, so we didn't have any challenges. This is something that I think originated or bubbled up from the ground level in the Muskegon area of Michigan and the Grand Rapids area, and was put into the appropriation at the legislative level, and we didn't have anything to do with that until after the fact, after appropriations later, not once it was in the pilot phase, and then we would answer questions about what we thought we needed to move it forward. So yeah, unfortunately, I don't have any help on that front. I see a question about any tax breaks for the parent or the employer. So the state of Michigan does not offer any additional incentives around tax breaks for it. Our Michigan Department of Treasury looked at the IRS tax break stuff and for the families and thought that it met everything that they needed to be able to maintain their tax credits at the federal level. We don't have any guidance from the employer's perspective. We do know that there is that employer child care tax credit that's out there. We don't have any legal advice or guidance on whether or not this program meets those parameters. My guess would be that it probably does not, but again, this is because my understanding of the employer child care tax credit is that it is a credit for when an employer is actually building a facility or providing the child care, or is providing a service to help people, or paying for a service to help people find childcare. And so there's no administrative cost to the employers. They're just paying a third of the childcare cost itself, not an administrative fee or a service fee. So I don't know if it applies, but that's one of those that we're hoping that that one of the companies might ask the IRS for guidance on that, so that we have something we can point to. But the state does not offer any incentives around that.
I have a question.
So I see a question now about the actual role of the regional facilitator hubs. So at this point, with our new iteration, I guess, with taking the administrative burden off of the hubs and putting it on the statewide administrative partner, then our regional facilitator hubs really are, for lack of a better word, our sales force to go out and sell this as a benefit to employers in their region. And so we do have a variety of types of entities that are serving as our regional facilitator hub. And I think that their success or the types of employers that they are recruiting into the program really varies based on the type of organization they are. So, a piece of advice that I have for states that might be considering something is to think about who you want to be your facilitator hubs early on and write that into your process. Our pilot was a true pilot, and it was a everything goes experiment kind of thing. And so we had all different types of organizations, like a Goodwill, a United Way, intermediate school district, social service agencies. And it really depends on where those entities are already sitting down with employers, or where their comfort level is in talking to employers or corporations. And so we are seeing that those particularly nonprofits that are regularly in relationship with employers and business people are having more success. So like your Goodwills and your United Ways that talk to or are sitting at tables with employers all the time tend to be a little bit more successful than those that aren't. But on the flip side of that is that the ones that aren't as successful with the sort of corporate types are doing a great job of bringing in childcare providers as employers. So it really depends. Had I been able to do this differently, I probably would think about that a little more clearly and maybe look to economic development groups or things like that, maybe to serve as facilitator hubs. But we are, variety helps get you diversity in the types of employers that we have. So we're just going to keep going with the employers or the facilitator hubs that we have and see how well we can do at expanding the number of employers that are participating, now that the only thing that our facilitators hubs are responsible for is to go out and recruit.
I have a few questions. With how many children, I know how many children are currently serving, but based on the appropriation that they have, how many children could they serve? Like, how many children could they serve based on their current appropriation or their current funding? The other question, sure, of course.
So I see the question based on the state appropriation, how many children could be served? That's a question that we're hoping to have a better ability to answer now that we have everything going through this one statewide administrative partner. Our best guess right now at the $3.4 million a year, taking into account paying the cost for the statewide administrative partner and paying a small fee to our regional facilitator hubs, we think we could sustain about 1,000 to 1,500 children over the course of a year based on our previous track record. It's been kind of difficult to track that across 12 different hubs that were tracking their payments in 12 different ways. And also because we haven't had a full year of this program without some major change to it, we haven't been able to really get a good year with good momentum to give us that data that we're looking for. So moving forward, we're hoping to be able to have that data and be able to do predictions better. But right now, the best we can do is looking at the sort of ups and downs that we've had over the last couple of years, given the multiple ways that families use childcare and how that changes seasonally. So right now, we're looking at about 1,500 children.
My next question is, does the money follow the child? So if the employee is dismissed or moves to another center, does that child is dropped immediately from care?
I see a great question about whether the money follows the child. No. Well, yes and no. The money follows the employer who's participating. So if the employer is participating, their employee is eligible, they're a part of the program. If the child changes childcare providers and that their parent is still employed or the employee is still employed by the employer, as long as the new provider is cool with, sending the bill to us, that's fine. So where the child goes doesn't matter as much as remaining with an employer who is participating. So if the parent quits that job or loses that job, they lose this as a benefit, just like they would, any of the other benefits that employer provides. So our hope is that when they move to another employer, that either it'd be great if that employer is already participating, then they can just be right back in the system, or that they can try to get that employer signed up to be a part of the program. So, and again, it does depend on the new employer and what their budget was and, what their process is for it. So, that's the best we can do. This is a workforce development program that's based with an employer. So, yeah. What percentage of employees who need care are eligible? I don't know that I can answer that question. Yeah, it's been hard. One of the things that we were trying to do with both our evaluation and our strategic planning was trying to figure out, how many families, how many households fall in between that 200 to 325%. But that's not really a good number because then you have to take those households, where are they employed, getting their employer to sign up and all of that. So I don't have the answer to that question, unfortunately. If I'm understanding the question correctly, you can rephrase it if I didn't understand correctly. Oh, I see a question about how many applicants that we've had. if you give me just 1 second, we just started getting this information from our statewide partner. And so I should be able to tell you that if I just keep talking while I'm clicking through to find it. Let me see if I have it here. Oh, I don't have it on that one. Let me see. I apologize, I didn't have this right at my fingertips, but I'm opening up their Excel spreadsheet now. Wish I had some music to play while I was doing that. So let's see, for the month of February, since I think since November, there have been, since they started tracking in January, there's been 1,465 applicants. So that's a rough number based on the information that our admin partner was able to get from the hubs about how many they had had. So we're going to start some fresh numbers starting with January moving forward. But at this point, it looks like for the totals in February, there was 1,465 applicants, 819 are currently approved. I see a question about if an employee is enrolled and they leave their company, how quick of a turnaround before that money goes to another family? It depends on the employer. We are able to, to end that as soon as we are notified that the family's left. We try to build in some time there so that it's not like an immediate cutoff. But it's really depends on the agreement that was made between the employer and our statewide administrative partner. So if the employer is ready to turn around and open it up to someone else, we do have some employers that have wait lists going themselves inside their company. So when somebody leaves, they're able just to call up the next person and we can just turn around that paperwork as soon as we get it.
I have a quick question as well. So what does the HR look like for the business as well as, or what does the inner workings look like for the business as well as the provider? I know that they are, all of this is going through the statewide partner, but what is the lift for the business? What does the business have to do administratively? Both.
What does HR look like for the business employer as well as the provider? What is the lift and administrative burden? So for the providers, as providers, we've tried to make that no lift at all. They have an invoice that they would normally send to their family. We have them send it to the statewide partner instead. We are trying to use like an online portal for them to just log on and drop off their invoice. But we're flexible and the statewide partner is trying to help the providers do that in whatever way is easiest for them. For the employer, I say we, but it's our statewide administrative partner who's actually doing it all, but they are working with the employers, and in I would say 99% of the cases, the employers are using payroll deduction to withhold that the employee's contribution. They kind of figure out what the cost is going to be likely for a year, for the full year of care for that family based on the market rates, and factoring in any information they get from the provider about rates going up in the summertime versus the fall or that kind of stuff. And then they kind of break it out over 12 months, or whatever the payroll schedule is for that company. And the employer does a payroll deduction to hold what it is from the employee. And then they get usually, and again, it depends on the agreement that's been made between the employer and the statewide partner. But usually the statewide partner invoices the employer monthly to say, this is your total amount of your 1/3 share for each of your participating employees. And here's the 1/3 amount from each employee that we need. And they get one check then sent to them from the employer that pulls all of that. And then they send an invoice to us at the state monthly for the state's overall contribution across all the employers and employees. And they try to do like a reconciliation a couple of times a year just to make sure that the rates haven't changed that much, that everyone's on target for the right payroll deduction and all of that. And they are also willing to do those audits at any time if there's any employee that thinks that there's too much being withheld or not enough or anything like that. So we try to keep it really simple, just with that payroll deduction and one invoice that they send over to pay. But again, trying to be flexible, knowing that every employer has things a little bit different. And so we want to be able to, to serve our small employers as well as our large employers that have giant HR departments that can help them with payroll. Yeah, I could talk about the age ranges. So the intention is for this to cover childcare costs for ages 0 to 12, and because that's 0 to 12 is what our childcare licenses are for. We do cover children's camps, and so those go above the age of 12. So as long as the employer is willing to pay for camps. We don't yet have the data around what percent, like what the ages are of the children currently participating and what the percentages are across the board. Because again, we had 12 different facilitator hubs tracking all of that differently, and some of them weren't necessarily tracking it. So now that we have everything going through one statewide administrative partner, that's in our sort of phase 2 of data that we're looking at, starting to track and implement once we get through our initial, but like a more immediate data needs. So hope to have that. I'll come back in a year and let you know. So I see the question here about to get to 775 children served, how many seats were available already, or required creation of new sites or childcare slots. We don't really have like a one-to-one correlation on that. At the same time that the My Tri-Share program was getting started, Governor Whitmer had also introduced this Caring for My Children initiative that was to create 1,000 new slots throughout the state of Michigan, or 1,000 new childcare providers. And so that was kind of happening alongside this. So I don't know that there was necessarily any direct correlation between My Tri-Share, between an employer signing up for My Tri-Share and creating on-site childcare or something like that. Yeah, I don't know. I can't we didn't track it that way. So there are, other things that the governor is doing to try to continue creating more capacity. So happy to share some links to that information after this webinar. Are there stipulations to the way the 1/3 is paid? Is it pre-tax for the employer? I would have to look up. I'd have to look that up. I don't know that off the top of my head. I can share our letter from our Michigan Treasury after the fact that can be shared, or after this webinar that can be shared around. I believe it's payroll deducted from the employee pre-tax, but I'm not positive about that. Is the employee payroll deduction required? No, it's not required. It's recommended as the easiest way to do it, but we're figuring out ways around that and being flexible if we can. What we're trying to avoid is having the employee pay their 1/3 directly to the child care provider, and then our state administrative partner doing the other 2/3 from the employer and the state of Michigan, because we don't want any providers to get caught not getting their full payment as a part of this process. So we are trying to do it the best way we can by getting using payroll deduction, but it doesn't have to be that way. There are some employers, I think, that are using other means to collect. They're collecting from their employee, the employee's 1/3 in a different way so that they can make the one payment for the 2/3 over to the provider. And then I see another question about, is there a wait list for the state subsidy or scholarship program? I don't believe we currently have a wait list for our child care scholarship. I think that we still have room there. Our scholarship goes up to about 200% of the federal poverty line. It's a little bit different because they also have the median income and all those other requirements that they have to consider, but so they go up to about 200%, and I think that there's still room there. Oh, so a mention of some kind of waiver for families. So the waiver for the families is not about their contribution. It's about, we have a waiver for if they fall outside of our eligibility threshold. So if the household income is less than 200% or more than 325%, that's where our waiver process comes in. At this point, the family, they have to pay the full 1/3. So there's not really a waiver for that piece of it in the My TriShare program. Obviously, the child care subsidy, child care scholarship has a different approach to that. But at this point, for the My TriShare program, the family is paying the full 1/3 for whatever child or child care coverage is participating in the program. And so when it's how our siblings handled, that's up to the employer. So again, it goes back to the employer setting what their overall budget is that they have for this, and then determining how they're going to roll that out to their employees. So for some For some employers, they have said that they'll cover one child per family. Some have said they'll cover all of the children that need it for each family, but then they have a lottery or something like that to pick which employees are going to be a part of it if they have to do that. Some of them set a budget that covers anybody who needs it for whatever children they need. Yeah, we leave that up to the employer because they have to contribute their third as well. So trying to keep those decisions within their workplaces.
For those who are on the live stream, I just want to thank Shannon for joining us today and sharing that incredible presentation and patiently working through the technical issues with us. And I just want to text her my thanks now also.
Thank you, and yes, thanks to Shannon. This has been a lot of information for us to think about. Before we have a motion to adjourn.
And I'm sorry, Senator Mizell, I wonder if we just want to draw folks' attention to the other article.
Oh, yeah, that was great. In our packet, there's a story giving other states examples of how they work with the tri-share. It was very interesting and kind of peeped at especially Kentucky. And what I found remarkable that Representative Freiberg and I were talking about was the level of engagement of the business community in making that happen. So that's going to be a good conversation.
Yeah, I would add to that. We were Googling the tri-share model and all the entities that are the regional spokespeople and all of the different businesses that are involved. So I would recommend you take a look at that tri-share website.
Everybody's got a chamber. Yeah. No, can't imagine. We wouldn't know. Yeah, it's just the first I've heard about it, actually. Well, that I've seen. I don't think we've discussed it, have we, Karen? No, this is a new concept for us. So.
We have at the Policy Institute did a webinar back in August, and part of the discussion with this cost-sharing model is how we could potentially leverage our school readiness tax credits to maybe be a portion of the tri-share model too. What would that look like? Because we already have a tax credit on the books for employers. They could put up to $5,000 per seat and get half of that back, and it's underutilized. And that could be a way to start thinking about what a cost-sharing tri-share model would look like in Louisiana. Because for us to think about a direct appropriation might be a little tricky, but if we could utilize our tax credits in a different way, it might be helpful too.
Yeah, I'd like to talk to you about that. Thank you. Thank you all for your attention and engagement on this and coming out this afternoon. Are there any public comments? That's such a new person's question. That's great. That's great. But we feel like we're here a lot. I mean,
But I have the same question, not as a new person.
but it's like a legislative session coming
It's
up.
5 months, and we have a report that's due in September, and there's nothing in between.
I mean, does that all come from the department? Or where does this?
Yeah, we can discuss it more, but it's knowing that the task force usually takes on a lot of that work on the report and brings recommendations usually to the commission. And then, as you noting that there's a session coming up. But we have a full commission full of really talented, smart people that might want to be able to be engaged in what the task force is thinking about, so that it can be an iterative process between the bodies, because the task force is of the commission too.
Point well taken. Point well taken. I think I don't know where we would go with that idea from here in order to be able to make any adjustment to the calendar.
I think you can look at it and
And
consider it,
visit.
they're tentatively scheduled for that
Okay,
because it
yeah.
is difficult to grab the room.
And
So
I
we
do
wanted to grab
appreciate
what we
your
could
visit.
find.
Yes, yeah, 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 that's exactly what that means. I think the thing is, there's, the bills for session are basically already done. Right, so, I mean, nothing, but I'm saying, nothing's gonna be put in legislatively that you wouldn't have some awareness of. Is that what you just wanna be able to be on the loop on the information? Okay, no, yes, right, right. I don't think we'd never let that happen. No, everything's gonna come here first. At, well, it appears it's gonna be after session. But I mean, you're talking about the task force information? Right, right.
It tends to be very difficult to get together a body during session, but we'll talk about it.
Yeah, okay, okay. Any other public comment? And, before, I'm sorry, I don't need a motion. Right now, we do have the meeting tentatively scheduled for August 21st. Uh, we're gonna leave with the idea that that will be looked at and reviewed, and we'll get back to the commission. And at this point, I'll adjourn today's meeting. Thank you all. I just feel like it. That's great. And there's nothing for shows about being there. It's like, great. She doesn't want one, I want. So, yeah. We're split on. I just feel like, I mean, this was